Hello guys, and welcome back to another video tutorial of the IGCSE Computer Science paper series. So this is following my previous video tutorials that I've done for previous IGCSE Computer Science past papers, and this is focusing on past paper 2 exams. If you go to my channel, you should be able to find it in my playlist. It's called the IGCSE paper 2 solutions, as you can see here, and I've been covering a couple of past paper exams, and I've done the respective programs for these past papers, explaining how they need to be completed. So this might be of help to you. So you can find all of the 5 video tutorials that I have so far on this playlist. Without further ado, I'm going to go back to today's main past paper, which is focusing on the 2017 May-June past paper of Computer Science IGCSE. We're going to be looking at this pre-release scenario, and we are going to be interpreting this pre-release scenario into a program as usual, and I will be explaining how this can be completed. In the next video tutorial, we will be answering the questions as usual. So the questions that follow based on this program, we will answer in our next video tutorial, so stay tuned for that one coming up next weekend. So let's get started. For this IGCSE past paper pre-release material, it talks about a senior citizens club outing organizer. So I'm just going to read it as it goes, and I'll just explain how we can trace out the main points for each task and how each task should be completed. So it says the organizer of a senior citizens club arranges the outings for the members. For each of these outings, a coach is hired, meals at a restaurant are reserved, and tickets for the theater are booked. A program is required to work out the cost and provide a printed list showing everyone on the outing. And it says write and test. So this is always a standard instruction where it says write and test a program for the club organizer. Your program must include appropriate prompts for the entry of data. Error messages and other output need to be set out clearly. All variables and constants and other identifiers must have meaningful names. It also says you will need to complete these 3 tasks, and each task must be fully tested. So task 1 says you need to focus on working out the total cost of the outing. The organizer finds out how many senior citizens will be interested in the outing, and then the program for task 1 would work out the cost using the information table below here. So this information table basically presents the number of people that are going to be going for this outing. And then, of course, this refers to the senior citizens. So if there are 12 to 16 people, that means that a coach of $150 could be hired. The cost of the meal for each person would be $14, and the cost of a theater ticket would be $21. If there's 17 to 26 people, which again refers to the senior citizens, then a $190 coach could be hired. And then, of course, the cost per meal is $13.50, and then, of course, $20 for the cost of the theater ticket. If there are 27 to 39 people going, then a 225 coach could be hired, and the cost for the meal would be $13, and the cost for the ticket will be $19. I don't know if you guys have noticed a pattern here, but what you notice is the cost of the meal and the ticket kind of decreases where there are more people, but of course the coach cost increases as well. So for task 1, it says the minimum number of citizens. So this is important information. So what I advise my students always to do is kind of trace the information that you have. So the really important information all the way starts from task 1. So now that you know that this is the information you need to be able to use to calculate the total cost, you're going to have to make sure that you trace out what exactly you're going to be requiring from the user when using this program. So another essential information goes from here where it says that, the minimum number. So it says the minimum number of senior citizens that need to go for this outing is a 10. So we know the min is 10. So we kind of write it somewhere. Min number is going to be equal to 10. So that's something you should put down by the side. If you guys watch my first or previous video tutorial, you will see that I made a video tutorial where I did explain, that was the very first one, I did explain how you can trace out these main points before you create a program. So the minimum number of senior citizens that can go for this outing is 10. And then it says there cannot be more than 36 citizens going for this outing. So that tells you the maximum is basically 36, okay? It cannot be more than 36. It can't be 37. It should be just less than or equal to 36. And it says that the minimum, so I'll erase this so you can see. It says the minimum of 2 carriers must go on the outing. So also that is an important. So guys, as I was mentioning, so again, the minimum number of senior citizens that can go is 10 and the maximum is 36. It also says a minimum of 2 carriers must go on this outing. So we know again the minimum number of carriers that can go on this outing should be anything that is greater than or equal to 2. So that is the carriers. So a minimum of 2 carriers. So if we write this down, this is another information. So carriers should be greater than or equal to 2. And then it also says that with an additional carrier, it says that an additional carrier can also go on this outing if the number of senior citizens going on this outing is 24. So we would only have a +1 carrier that will go on this outing if the number of citizens going, so number of citizens, I'm just going to write number of C, is greater than 24. It says more than, so it's greater than, not greater than or equal to, but just greater than 24. It also says carriers do not need to have to pay anything for the outing. So carriers are not charged for the outings. Carriers, sorry guys, I keep saying carriers, but carriers are not charged for the outing. So we're supposed to work out the total cost and the cost per person for the senior citizens. So task 1, basically what it's giving you hint is it's telling you what the minimum and the maximum amount of senior citizens are accepted for this outing. It's also telling you how many carriers can go for this outing. And it's also mentioning if there are 24 senior citizens going on this outing, then only it should be at least the amount of carriers that are going +1 based on the number based on the 24 numbered citizen counts, that is senior citizen count that's going for this outing. So that's for task 1. You need to trace out these points. It's very important to kind of write them down on a book or journal, or even type them out on a Google Doc file, or etc. But it's important for you to jot the traced points out so that you know exactly what you're expected to do per task. And that's pretty much how you solve most of these pre-release scenarios. The task 2 is a different task. This one is for you to focus on recording who is going on the outing and how much has been paid. So this one basically is just asking them, if you ask them in task 1 how many senior citizens are going, and the user then replies with a certain number, of course, where the number has to be anything greater than or equal to 10, and then of course less than or equal to 36. So if of course that number is accepted, then the next thing to do would be to ask them recording the names. According to this, it records the names of the people going on the outing and the amount that they have paid. So that means you could say the total cost. It also should include the carers on the outing. So you also definitely need to include the names of the carers who are going. At least that's what I think would be necessary when they said include the carers on the outing. I assume that it definitely would be the carers' names and who is going as the carer for this particular outing that has been booked or paid for. It also says if there are spare places on the coach, then extra people can be added and they are charged the same price as senior citizens. So one very important thing you need to take note of in this one is the extra space. You definitely need to find out the extra space. And how do you do that? Well, whenever you ask them how many people are going on how many senior citizens are going for the outing, depending on what number they tell you, it must fall within this range. And if, for example, it is not the maximum number, for example, from 12 to 16, 16 is the maximum for this particular amount to count. And then from 17 to 26, 26 is the maximum for these amounts to count, and 39 and so on. So if, for example, they book an outing for only 14 people, then you know that the extra space is going to be, since it's 14, it falls in the first range of 12 to 16. The extra space obviously is going to be the 16 minus the 14 people, which means 2 extra spaces. And you have to let them know that there are 2 extra spaces, which means extra people can be added to this space. And what we know here, according to what we see, is that if extra people are added, they are charged the same price as the senior citizens, which means the same cost of meal, the same cost of theater tickets, and etc. And finally, what it wants you to do is once you calculate the total amount of money collected, which means the total amount, if there are extra people, of course, that means you're adding the amount of the senior citizens, how many they are, times the cost per person, plus the extra people times the cost per person, since it's the same cost, and you're adding all of that together and you're getting the total amount, and you're printing the list of people going on the outing. So this is exactly what task 2 wants you to do. For task 3, it is entirely different. So task 3 asks you to identify the break even or profit that will be made on the outing. Break even basically means when there is no loss or profit made. It's kind of like uh there's no win or lose. It's basically an outing where each space has been paid for, and that is how it should be. It's a fair pay. So it's break even, and profit, of course, would be meaning if they're going for an outing and like I said, 14 people are going and it's a coach of 12 to 16. So it has a capacity to carry 16 people. Then if there are 2 extra spaces and someone wants to go, that will again be a profit. And again, whenever there are extra spaces, you've paid for the whole coach. So it doesn't really matter if 16 people are going or not. So it's still a profit. So in that situation, that is where we can say that there's profit being made, because if the extra people are going, they still have to pay those charges for meal and cost. So it is not, I just want to bring your attention that this break even or profit does not relate to profit, or it does not relate to whether there's a loss or a benefit or there's a profit in the coach you're hiring. But it's talking about the entire outing itself. And of course, the entire outing will be profitable if, of course, you'd have extra people paying for the meal and the theater ticket. So it wouldn't be a waste, again, like I said, for the coach. So it says, for this task, you need to show whether the outing had made a profit or had broken even using the estimated cost from task 1 and the money collected from task 2. So guys, this is exactly what you need to do. Again, you need to highlight these points. So you know that task 3 is all about determining if there's a profit or there's a break even, basically, for task 3. And you know that task 2 is all about printing a list of people going on this outing and finding the total money, total cost for the outing. And then task 1 is, of course, where you register the number of senior citizens going. So to go now to the program, I just wanted to write broke even because I wanted to say what eTask was doing. Going back to the program right now, I'll just briefly explain how the program runs so that you guys can see. So first part will be the introduction part of the program. It's always good as a programmer to include comments. Again, I include import time here. So we can have a time gap of a couple of seconds to make the program a bit more realistic when running between some print statements or some display input statements. So that's pretty much why I have import time. I again have from tabulate import tabulate. If you guys have watched the previous video tutorials, you probably know what this is by now. Import tabulate is basically a module that is extended from Python, and it's used to display data or information in a tabular form. So the reason I did that, obviously you can imagine, was because I would need to display this table of information in a tabular form for the user to see, of course, before booking for an outing. Then, of course, I had names of citizens list, and I had name carriers names list again, and I had names extra people's list. So this already tells you that I'm using this to store the names of the senior citizens going, the carriers that are going for the outing, and if there are any extra people. And then, of course, we have profit. So this profit is another list that is used to store if there is the profits that have been made, if there is a profit that has been made or not, if it was a break even, or if there was a profit. So it basically stores one of those options based on the outing that is booked for. And then final cost is used to store the total cost of this outing. And then I have a welcome message here welcoming the user to the Senior Citizens Club Organizer e-platform, which I just included. So it's just nice to always make it user-friendly. And then a 2-second gap between the first this message is displayed, and then 2 seconds after the next message is displayed, which says, please find the information below for booking an outing. And then after 2 seconds, I have this table, which then now begins task 1 and 2 and 3 all together sections. So basically what this means is all of the program you're going to see below down here is all including task 1, 2, and 3. So this table is a tabular form, is a table that, again, like I said, is just basically showing this information that is here. So I just wanted to print it out so that the user can see. I have included the use of color, and if you want me to give you the website for where I get the colors and features, And just let me know in the description box down below, or comments box, sorry, not description, but comments, and then I will include the link as well. You can get a lot of interesting features to include in your program. So I have included the code for the table to be displayed in a particular color, and this is the code for how we display table using Tabulate. First, we have to enter the data, in which you can see the 12 to 16 range and the price per meal, and the cost of the coach, and then the theater, and this goes for all of the three number ranges. And then I printed the color, and this color is going to apply on the table itself that contains the columns with each field, each column name, as you can see here. So this section is just used to print the table with that information. Now, then the program begins by asking the user how many senior citizens will be going. And again, if you're wondering about this code, this is again a color code. So it is just to make my statement appear in a specific color, just because I like to make it a bit more colorful and interactive for the user. So it asks them how many citizens will be going. And then based on the response, it checks to see if it falls in the range of 12 to 16, which is the first option we have here, so that we can set the price of the coach, the meal cost, and of course the theater cost all as constants. So as it asks them how many citizens will be going, if it falls in this range, then it has a for loop, which is going to loop through the number of times based on the number of citizens the user has included or going. Then it's going to be asking them for the names of these citizens, and it's going to add that to the name citizens list, which we created above here, as you remember. So it can store the names using this append function. And then, of course, inside of the parentheses is the name of the variable, names of citizens that the user is going to be entering based on the number of citizens they said are going, senior citizens. So as you can imagine, this part is relevant for task 2, because task 2 does ask you to print the list of number of people going. And for you to be able to do that, you need to have a place where you can store the names of the citizens, the carriers, and if there are any extra people going as well. So after that, then the program goes ahead to ask how many carers will be going. And then, of course, if the carer numbers are greater than or equal to 2, then it basically prints a message saying that carers do not have to pay for this outing, just to let the users know. And then a variable, which is kind of like a constant, actually a constant since it doesn't change. The carers number is then set to the number of carers going. The reason for that you will see is because we would like to iterate and repeat using a for loop to ask for the names of the carriers going as well. So as you can see, this for loop is the same thing as that of the citizens. It asks for the name of these carriers, since task 2 wants you to display all the names. And then it appends that again to the names carriers list using the append function, including in the parentheses the names of the carriers variable that's going to be storing the names. Then there is another variable that's called extra space check. And this one is used to check if there's any extra space. And how it does that is that it uses the maximum number of people per range subtracted from the number of citizens that are going. And then it uses an if conditional statement to check if this extra space is equal to 0, as in if there is no extra space. If there is no extra space, then it basically appends in the extra people list. It appends a 0 because there are no extra people. And then it has the constant. There are constants like coach hire, which is set to 150, the cost of meal, which is 14, the cost of a theater ticket, which is 21, based again on the table information, as you can see here. So all this information are set as constants because they remain the same. And that's used to find a cost per person variable, which is used to find the cost per each person by adding up the coach hire and the cost of the meal and the cost of a theater ticket. One thing I would say that I didn't do here is, since the coach hire is basically the amount for all the 16 people in this coach, I would say what you can do, please, is try to do this. Divide this by 16, because I didn't really do this. And this gives you the cost per person. So this is more viable to say, because when you divide it by 16, then basically what you get, you're going to be adding it to the cost per person. And that's going to help you to figure out what the correct cost per person is. Because if you just add the $150, that's going to be too much. And this is just one person we're talking about. So I just made the change right now. So 150 depending on the coach hire, divided by the maximum number of people that can be on this coach, which is 16, and that's going to give you the cost per person. So as you can see, the cost per person is calculated by adding the coach hire, which is this one, plus the cost of the meal, which is 14, plus the cost of the theater. The total cost is going to be the number of citizens that are going, senior citizens, times the cost per person. And then, of course, we created another list called final cost, and this was going to be storing the total cost for each condition, depending on what it is, each section, whether it's a 12 to 16, whether it's the 17 to 26 area section. So it really depends on the range of people going. So this final cost is going to be storing whatever total cost has been found based on the number of citizens going. And then there's another constant called the check profit, which is set to broken even, because as you realize, there is no extra space, so there is no profit or loss. It's basically just paying for the space, which has been, registered or booked. And so this status of broken even is then added to the profit list using the append function, so that at the end of the day, if you guys remember for task 3, you're supposed to display and say whether there had been a profit made or there's been a broken even, which means no profit or loss has been made. And so the elif statement is the elif in case if the extra space is not equal to 0, which means there is actually extra space, then it's going to be asking the user, telling them that the coach has more spaces to fill, and then it's going to tell them, would you like to add extra people, yes or no? And if the response is equal to yes, then it's going to tell them to enter the number of extra people they would like to add, because they have to choose if they want to add or not. And then again, there's the for loop that asks them to enter the names of these extra people, and that gets appended and added to the names extra people list. And again, we have this coach hire, which again, we have to kind of divide by 6 as well. So we divide it by 16, because again, there are 16 people. So it's the same thing we have to apply. We divide it by 16 again, and then the cost of the meal, $14, and then the cost of the theater. So all these are constants that remain the same based on the information you're given. And then the cost of per person is adding up all of them together. And then the total cost, of course, in this case, since there are extra people going, is going to be the number of citizens times the cost per person plus the extra people addition number, which of course is based on the number of people going, times the cost per person. Since in the question, if you refer back to the pre-release, it does say that if there are any extra people, they pay the same price as the senior citizens, so they are not charged a different price. And again, we have the final cost list, which appends the total cost. And this time we have the check profit is set to made profit, because now we have some extra people going, which means you're going to have to pay for meals and they're going to have to pay for theater tickets, which means there's going to be a profit for the business, for the outing, of course, because then they get more money from the people going extra. And so that status is being appended to the profit list. And then this else, guys, this pretty much takes, it goes all the way to this yes, if question is equal to yes. Else, if they don't want to add any extra people, of course, it asks them. So this else relates to that. If they don't want to have extra people, then it just prints a message saying, okay, thank you. And it pretty much sets everything to the way it was before again, where it gets the coach hire, 150 divided by the 16, the cost of the meal, the cost of theater, and everything else remains the same without calculating any extra person for the total cost, and it still adds up. And then this final else that you see here is when they enter the number of carriers that is anything less than, basically tracing here, if it's anything less than 2, then of course this else is going to be saying, sorry, the carriers number is too little. And then it will tell them to restart the whole program all over again. And pretty much, guys, I'm not going to repeat this part because this part, again, is just exactly the same as the 12 to 16 range, where, again, it asks them for the number of citizens going. The only difference here is that it says if the number of citizens are greater than 24. The reason is because the second range from 17 to 26 does also fall within the range where the number of citizens can be greater than 24. And if you go back to the instructions, it does say if the number of senior citizens are greater than 24, then that would mean that there should be an additional carer. And so this is why it's essential to have this if conditional statement to check with the number of citizens variable based on the number of citizens the user is going to enter. So if they enter a number that is indeed greater than 24, which means it's not 17, it's not 18, it's not 19, it's not 20, it's not 21, it's not 22, neither is it 23, but a number that is greater than 24, then it's going to be asking them again the number of times the citizens they've entered. Of course, this for loop is going to ask them to enter the names of the people going, and it's going to add again the names. So this repeats itself. It adds the names to the named citizens. Now, when it asks them for the carriers, how many carriers are going, obviously there has to be at least two or more carriers going. Then it's going to be the same variable name that we had set, called carrier numbers for the first 12 to 16 range. Only now this is going to be a carrier's number plus 1. So depending on the number of carriers they say are going, plus an additional 1, because there are 24 people more. And then again, this basically is another for loop that repeats, asking them to enter the carrier's name, and that adds to the names of carriers list. And then again, we have the extra space check again. So pretty much the same thing as I've explained, but don't forget to please divide this by the coach hire divided by the total number, a maximum of people that can go on this coach, which is 26, which then gives you the cost per person, because you're trying to find cost per person. And then that gets added to the coach hire plus the cost of meal and the cost of the theater to demand the cost per person. And then the total cost, of course, is the number of citizens times the total cost. So everything is pretty much repeated the same, including if the extra space is not equal to a 0. So the number of extra people, again, this gets divided by the maximum number of people, which is 26. So don't forget to do that. And then it pretty much repeats itself. If there is any extra person going or extra people going, if they say yes, then they're pretty much going to have to enter their names of those people. And of course, it's going to calculate the cost per person. And then it pretty much does else if there are no extra people going, even though there are extra spaces, it just pretty much adds the cost as normal without adding the extra people number. So everything is the same, guys. And the else statement, of course, if they enter anything of a carrier less than 2. And this also happens for the 17 to 24 range of age. If the age is not the number of citizens is greater than or equal to 17, and less than or equal to 24. So if it falls within this range, because initially it was greater than or equal to 17, less than or equal to 26, but we had to check if it was greater than 24. So now what I'm saying is, if it falls within the range of just from 17 to 24, not greater than 24, but from 17 to 24 people, then it's going to repeat the same thing again, asking them the same questions, only this time it will just be dividing by the maximum number of people again that can go for this particular outing, which, if you remember, for 120, in this case, since it's a range of 17 to 24, you still have to divide it by the 26, because this is just dividing it into ranges, where we know the amount of people going. If they're less than or equal to 24, then we don't have to have an additional carrier. This is the reason why I created another ELIF statement, even though it's kind of very similar to the first ELIF statement here, so don't get confused. Just to differentiate between this, if the number of citizens is greater than 24. So guys, and then it repeats itself, like I said. So it checks for any extra space by subtracting 24 minus the number of citizens. I'm dividing this by 26 because it's the same coach you are hiring of $190. So you still have to divide it by 26, even though you've set the range here for just the 17 to 24 people. But according to the information table, from anything 17 to 26, then this is the cost of the coach. So you need to divide it by 26 to determine the cost per person. And so that's why I did it that way. And then if there's any extra space, again, guys, it's the same thing pretty much. It calculates, it asks for the extra people, adds them to the names, extra people list with the names of the people. And again, this is divided by the 26. And then, of course, the cost per person is found out. And if they say no extra people, then, of course, it remains the same. It doesn't have any extra people cost that is added to the total cost. And now, guys, the same thing happens from 27 to 36. Remember that according to this information here, initially it says there cannot be more than 36 people. So it should be a range of from anything less than or equal to 36, which is what we have in this condition here. and everything else is pretty much the same again. So again, it asks them for the names of the citizens going, it asks them for the number of carriers going, and then carriers plus one automatically is added for this one, since it starts from a range of 27 to 36, which is greater than 24. So we don't necessarily need to have that if a number of citizens greater than 24 conditional statement. We just add a plus one here because it does fall in that category for the carriers. And so again, it basically, it runs the range of the number of carriers that if you say you are going with three carriers, 3 plus 1, which means 4, it's going to ask you for the 4 names and add that to the names of carriers list. And then again, extra space is calculated. The coach hire again is divided by 36 since it's a max of 36 people. And all of that cost of meal and ticket is used to found the total cost, which is then added to the final cost. And then of course the status of broken even. And if there are no extra spaces, if extra spaces is not, and I forgot, oh, here again, guys. So if there is a extra space is not equal to 0, which means that there are extra spaces. So this again is repeated asking the user if they would like to add extra people. If yes, it asks them for the number of people they would like to add. And it basically asks them for the names of those people and stores it in the list again. And then again, it calculates the total cost, which we can see here by dividing the coach hire of $225 by the max of people that can be on this coach, which is 36, and then adding that to the cost of meal and theater, which finds the cost per person. And then, of course, the total cost is multiplying the number of citizens times the cost per person plus the extra people addition times the cost per person. And then finally, this final cost dot append is used to add the total cost that has been found. And again, the check profit, which it says made profit because there are extra people going. So more people are going to be paying for the tickets and they're going to be paying for the meal cost. So that is going to give extra profit. And then finally, if not, they say no, they don't want to add extra people, then it just says, okay, thank you. And it pretty much does not add any extra person additional to the cost. And so that would mean it will be a broken even. And then else is this in case if they enter a carrier's number that is less than 2. And of course, this message is printed. And finally, if they enter any number of citizens that is less than 10, remember it says that it should be at least 10 people going. So if they enter anything less than 10, it's going to tell them, sorry, there should be at least a minimum of 10 people booked. So it has to be greater than 10. And then if they enter anything greater than 36, it's going to tell them, sorry, the maximum is 36. Finally, for task 2, it did say that you need to display the names of the people going, the list of people going. If you guys remember for task 2, print out the list of people on the outing and the total money calculated. So this is what this is doing right here. It's printing out the list of people going. And again, these codes are color codes. If you would like them, just let me know and I'll put the link of where I get the color codes from. So these are printing out this message for the number of senior citizens going. And I use the for loop basically just so that I can run through the named citizens lists. Okay, the for loop goes through each of those names in the for loops in the named citizens list and it prints it. So I just use the variables u, v, just random variable names. You can use any names you want. So this prints the names of the senior citizens. This one also does the same function using the for loop to print the names of the extra people from the names extra people list. And this one prints the names of the carriers. And finally, I also have a print statement here that prints the profit list as the first item. The reason I'm printing and selecting the first item is because this repeats itself, it keeps adding the same status of check profit or not check profit based on the number of people entered. So I just wanted this to show once whether it has gained profit or it has broken even. So that's why I just selected only the first, the first thing in this profit list would contain, of course, the status of whether there's been a profit made for that outing or not. So it just basically would display that result one time instead of repeating it. And then the same thing goes here 2 seconds after, which is why I'd use the time that's the import time in the first place. So 2 seconds after, it displays the total cost of this outing by displaying the final cost from the final cost list again by just taking the first final cost instead of repeating, because it will repeat itself for the number of people that have been added. The final cost will be the same because it's for all of the people, not just one. And then finally, it's going to print a thank you message, and 2 seconds after, it will print a bye-bye. So this is overall how this program would function for this pre-release, guys. And now I'm going to run this program so that you guys can see. So bear with me. This is, again, I love to use Replit because I think it's an easier access for many people to kind of use. And it just makes it easy when programming and explaining. So this is how it looks like, guys, when you run it. So it's asking for how many citizens are going to be going on this outing. So now I'm going to say, for example, let's say 12 citizens. It's going to ask me for the name of the citizens. So let's say Mark, one, Allison, Paul, Mary, Alicia, Misa. So how many do we have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6. We still have 6 more to go. Anika. I'm just going to say James. So we have 1, 2, so, and then I will say Roger and Nina, Lucy, Brad. Okay, so all the 12 people that are going for these outings have been entered as their names. Now it tells me how many carriers are going to go. I'm just going to say 2 carriers for now. And it tells me that carriers do not have to pay for this outing. It also asks me to enter the name of the carrier. So I'm going to say Mr. Jenkins, Mr. Jenkins, and Mrs. Aisha. And then now it says this coach has more places to fill. Would you like to add extra people? Guys, this goes towards the end. As you guys can see, the cursor is at the right, left side. I think it's something from Replit, but when you run this in your normal Python, it's going to come normal to the right side where you can click the yes. For some reason, this goes towards the end for some reason. So I'm going to say yes. It says yes. So because it asked me, would you like to add extra people? I said yes. So it says, how many extra people would you like to have? Well, since I have 12 people and this coach does have carry a maximum capacity of 16 people, I guess I have 4 extra people I can add. So I'm going to add 4 extra people. And now it asked me to enter the name of these extra people. So I'm going to say Ali, for example. Oops, sorry. Ali. And then I'm going to say Marky, and I'm going to say Soul, and then I'm going to say Lee. So let's say these are the extra people. And then finally, guys, you can see that it gives me the list of people going. So it does show me the senior citizens list, which I had included those 12 people before Mark, Allison, all the way to Brad. And it shows me the extra people, which are Ali, Marquis, Sol, and Lee. And it's also showing me the carers that are going. So this is the list of people. And then finally, it's showing me that the outing has made profit because of these extra people going. Of course, they have to pay extra. I mean, not pay extra, but they also have to pay, which adds to the cost. And then it tells me the total cost of this outing, which is $710. And then it finally says thank you, and it ends the program. So this is pretty much how the program would run. Pretty simple and short, but there are many ways to solve and to provide solutions to the pre-release scenarios because they are problems. And what you do as programmers is basically provide solutions. But this is the one way. This is the way that I wanted to explain to you guys of how you could do it in case if you were out of ideas of how you could solve this kind of pre-release. And I hope it was helpful for you. And I'm going to be stopping here for now, guys. If you have any questions, do let me know in the comment section down below. I'll see you for our next video tutorial to continue on answering the questions, which is the next section of paper 2, which is to answer the questions based on the program you've created and other aspects of paper 2. Have a great day, everyone, and I will see you soon. Thank you.